Hello, everybody. This is a very quick and impromptu video. I just wanted to jump on here to speak to you parent to parent after the death of Charlie Kirk, to talk to you about some ways that you can show up for your kids to help them grieve and understand what's going on in healthy ways, and also to help you understand what you may be feeling. Remember, at the Catholic Counseling Institute, our mission is to give you real tools for real life, combining psychology and theology so you have practical help whenever life feels overwhelming. And not everything rises to the level of needing to go to therapy. This is not therapy, but it is heavy. And Charlie's death is one of those moments. And so my hope in doing this is to walk alongside you here, to just have a little chat, give you some clarity and compassion, faith, and some ideas. Before we dive in, just know this is not monetized. This is not about clicks, nor am I trying to be political. I did not agree with every single thing that Charlie said. Probably neither did you. And yet, there was enough overlap that many of the viewers of this channel held similar values. And so I think that his death probably is affecting you and your household more, especially because his audience was teens, tweens, young adults. As parents, this puts us in a different situation or a different place to needing to know how to help our kids with their strong emotions. So we have to start by naming it clearly that Charlie Kirk has died. He was killed, and it's shocking. It's shocking to hear, it's shocking that it happened, it's shocking how it happened. And maybe you didn't know him personally. Many of us did not, but grief still sneaks in. Public figures carry meaning beyond themselves. They represent ideas and movements, or just even a sense of stability. So we can grieve the person and all of these other things. And when they're suddenly gone, it can feel like something's kind of ripped out under us, but we don't really have the words for it. Incidentally, I have been recording some modules for Grieving with Grace that I've been uploading. And the one I did yesterday, I talked about this myth of how grief shows up with public figures, so I'll insert it here. Myth 8. If you weren't that close to a person, your grief shouldn't be that intense. Grief is not determined solely by proximity or title. Sometimes we grieve what that relationship represented: a lost chance, an unmet need, a symbolic hope. We see this a lot when people who've never met a public figure have strong expressions of grief, even if they've never met that person. Think of the footage when Princess Diana died, or the Queen, and people who had never met them had very strong, very real expressions of grief. Other times it's the context of the loss or what it stirs up from the past. Pain is personal, and it's not always explainable in words, and that's okay. You might also ask why this hits harder than we expect. I know for myself, when I learned about his death and how it happened, I had a bodily response that was much stronger than I expected. It kind of took me by surprise. Remember that people like Charlie symbolize courage, strength, and convictions, things that are bigger than one individual. And I know that Charlie would be seen and known for these. He has said as much. I don't ever want to speak for him, so let's turn to some of his words. He reminds us, courage is contagious. When you stand up for what you believe, you give others permission to do the same. And when you see someone stand for what they believe, and then they lose that voice, it can sting in ways that don't always have words, but are still very real. And maybe you've also had this thought. I heard this a lot yesterday. It feels so strange. I feel so strange. So if you've had that thought, why am I so sad about someone I've never met? Let's talk about that, because closeness mixed with distance can feel very weird or strange. It is all normal. Grief doesn't follow neat rules. Research even shows that grieving public figures is its own category of loss. So if you feel off balanced right now, that actually makes total sense. Sometimes the death of a public figure can also stir up old grief, like a parent, a grandparent, a friend, even griefs that we think we've tucked away quite neatly. And that is because it opens up something called a neural network of grief, which is why we grieve the person in front of us and any unresolved griefs from the past. Another way of thinking about this is it's like holding up a mirror that shows us other wounds that we still carry. And so if you or your kids have felt a tidal wave of emotions that didn't seem tied to Charlie at all, that's also grief talking. And that can also feel weird and even perhaps disrespectful or disingenuous. However, it is very normal. It is the heart remembering what it's been through. And again, my point here is just to have a little chat about all the complicating feelings you might be having, to try to start giving words to them, creating some containers, and giving some order. Fear is a very normal part of grief. When something shocking happens, like the death of Charlie, our brains go on high alert. So your kids may feel or say, am I safe? Could this happen to me? Remember that fear is the body signaling, I don't feel steady right now. Our brain's job is to keep us alive, not happy. And that is okay too. The important thing is to remember that fear does not always define the reality. Our feelings are real, but not necessarily true. So the magnitude of fear we may have may not actually match with the actual level of danger. And while one death is absolutely tragic, especially in the way that it happened, these sorts of death are relatively rare, not meaning they aren't important and huge and unacceptable, tragic, but meaning they are not lurking around every corner. The important thing here, we have to acknowledge it, to sit with it, and then to remind ourselves that God is still with us in the middle, and we want to pause before we act. Here's what's happening inside. When we feel fear, the amygdala, that alarm system in our brain, lights up. It floods the body with stress chemicals, and that's why your heart races, or your kids may not be able to think clearly. Did your kids have difficulty with focusing on homework last night? Their brains are in survival mode, and knowing this helps us to respond with compassion. So instead of saying, oh, don't be scared, we could say, your body feels scared right now, but you are safe here, and I am here with you. That gives their nervous system a way back into the calm. Fear can also push us into tribes. It makes us want to hold on to people who feel the safest and push away people who don't. That can be good, and there can be a danger in that as well. Fear can easily turn into an us versus them mentality, no matter how you define the us and how you define the them. But as Christians, we're called to see each person as a neighbor, not an enemy. That doesn't mean that we don't feel afraid. It doesn't mean that we have to agree. It doesn't mean that we have to say things that are not okay are okay. It just means we need to be specific to a person, to an event, to an idea, not to generalize. It means we need to pause before acting out of fear. We ask, does this line up with my deepest values? And that shift can be very important. History shows us what happens when fear turns into division. There can be scapegoating, blaming, even violence, and that never heals a wound. It just multiplies it. So in moments like this, we need to be very careful not to let our grief spill over into anger, action directed at others in a general way. Instead, we choose compassion, connection, and faith as a way forward. One of the reasons Charlie did what he did is that when we talk to one another face to face, we see the humanity of the other person. He was always trying to find places of agreement because he believed that it would minimize violence. And I still believe that that's true, even in the face of what tragically happened to him. So what do we do with these strong feelings? We remember that they're signals, not commands. Fear tells us that we feel unsafe, but it doesn't mean that danger is around every corner. And anger tells us that something is wrong, but it doesn't mean we have to lash out, especially in a generalized way. It also doesn't mean we have to be silent. What I'm saying here is that we are intentional and specific. In grief, feelings are like road signs. They point us somewhere, but they don't have to drive the car. So with faith and reason, we can transform fear into courage, anger into passion or resolve for justice, and sadness into deeper compassion for others. For your older teens, this may be a good time to read Salvifici Dolores or On the Christian Meaning of Human Suffering by John Paul II. I will be sure and put a link in the comments. You can get a free copy of that on the Vatican's website. Remember that fear wants to divide us. The enemy wants to divide. The word diabolical means to divide, to label people as safer enemy. But the gospel asks more of us. When grief tempts us into tribal thinking, we have to pause and ask if this lines up with our deepest held values. And instead of reacting, we pray. We seek truth. We reach for connection. Even when we disagree, we can say, let's talk, let's reason together. That choice turns fear into courage and keeps us rooted in love. I'll share another quote from Charlie. You may disagree with me, but prove me wrong with ideas, not with silence or canceling. Let's debate, let's reason, let's talk. Anger is another emotion that shows up very naturally and normally in grief. Anger is our body's way of saying a boundary has been crossed. This is not supposed to happen. And that is not wrong. It also gives us energy, not woo-woo energy, but the kind of energy that raises our heart rate and makes our muscles tight, that we need to move to do something. It prepares us for action. Remember that scripture doesn't say, don't be angry. It says, in your anger, do not sin. Anger can be holy, especially if it feels justice or prayer, but if it festers, if it sits and stews and is not directed towards a healthy end, it can make us bitter. One of the phrases that has come to my mind again and again in the last 24 hours or so is be better, not bitter. With kids and teens, it's important to let them express anger in safe ways, through words, through movement, through prayer, while also teaching them not to let anger become the driver of their choices. Charlie shared on his account that 48% of people surveyed said that it would at least be somewhat justified to cancel or disappear Elon Musk. I'm trying to keep this YouTube friendly, so hopefully they keep us up. 55% said the same about Trump. And again, I'm not trying to make a political statement here, but to say that when our anger crosses into real world actions, that's a tipping point. Confusion is also common. Grief scrambles our thoughts. It can make us feel numb, disoriented, forgetful. Kids especially may not have words for it, and they may act out in ways that seems unrelated. So it helps to name it for them. Sometimes when someone dies, it makes our brains feel jumbled up. That's normal, and it will also clear. So normalizing this confusion, we help give them patience for themselves and compassion for themselves and others. The grief must move. So if they're struggling to focus on homework, maybe you go outside and take a walk. Even in the middle of fear, anger, and confusion, remember that there's always hope. Hope doesn't erase grief, but it shines through it like light breaking through the clouds. I talk even more about this in the grief modules, so feel free to watch them. Again, those are free on the channel. Our faith anchors us. We believe death is not the final word. So when you talk with your kids, remind them that light shines in the darkness and the darkness does not overcome it. Hope is not a feeling, it's a promise. It doesn't take away the pain. It helps us bear it. Again, I'll refer to words from Charlie. I believe faith is the most important thing in life. Without faith, nothing else matters. With faith, everything else falls into place. Grief doesn't look the same for everyone. In my own home, one of the adults needed to go to Mass right away. Another needed to sit and listen to others share on podcast or on the news. And both choices were honored in our hearts and in our homes. And that's what kids need to hear, that it's okay if your way of grieving looks different from mine or from Dad's or from your friends. There are many healthy ways, and we can support each other through them. We even had one heart in our home that felt it was very sad, but didn't understand the level of distress that some of the other hearts in our home had. And so navigating that and negotiating that is very important. Sometimes we think as parents, we need the right words, big gestures to help our kids through grief. And as parents, one of the reasons I wanted to come on here and talk to you is I know that it's very difficult to see our kids sad or angry or fearful or disillusioned, and to know there's not much we can do about it. But honestly, the best tools are simple and don't require props or a counseling degree at all. Just being present matters. You can see emotions and name them. You look sad. I see that you're angry. You can sit quietly together without rushing to fill in the silence. Silence is a hard thing to tolerate, and it can be a good thing to tolerate. There are some times when there is nothing to say. There's a saying, that I like. You can't make sense out of nonsense. Our brains are natural meaning makers, and they're going to want to complete the story, to find out why, to know all the nuances, and there will be some things we will not understand. And that is the place for silent presence, confident, silent presence. You can use honest words like he died instead of softening it in ways that might confuse kids. You can pray together as a family, even a short prayer, and you can check in gently. What feels heavy today? How are you doing? These small steps give grief room to breathe and teach kids that they don't have to carry it alone. Every death, especially when sudden, reminds us that life is fragile. None of us are promised tomorrow. This was very real for me because on Sunday I went to Barnes & Noble and I met a lady who was in the final stages of cancer. And she said, I'm not going to be on this earth much longer, maybe just a few weeks. And we talked and asked if I could pray for her. And I'm sure that Charlie didn't expect his life to end before hers. I certainly didn't. These moments don't need to fill us with fear. They can fill us with gratitude. Yesterday on the way home, my husband passed 2 very major wrecks. These roads, it's not uncommon to have wrecks, but not the major ones like this. And I certainly hope someone didn't lose their life, but one of them looked bad enough that it was possible. I'm sure that person didn't think that that could potentially be their last day. So we are not guided by fear, but to remember the fragility of life can be a gift. Again, I will refer to Charlie. Every day is a gift. If you wake up breathing, that's a day you can make a difference. Social media can amplify grief in huge ways. Sometimes it helps us feel less alone, and sometimes it makes us feel like we're supposed to grieve in a certain way or believe certain things. There's huge debates, I'm sure you know, on social media, depending on what people believe, if they agreed with Charlie's values or not, just about how tragic this actually is. Sadly, kids especially may feel pressure to react because of what they see online. Remind them that it's okay if your grief looks different or if it feels different from those around us. Even people in your family, you don't need to post about it all or to compare your feelings to everyone else's. The healthiest grief is the one that is honest for you. And as Christians, we grieve differently because we hold on to hope. This doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. We know death is not the end. Jesus said on the resurrection and the life, that truth doesn't erase pain, but it does give us a place to rest when the sadness feels heavy, that we can go back and forth. It doesn't erase sadness. It helps us carry it. This is a chance to tell our kids that grief is real, but so too is eternal life, and we can hold both of these at the same time. Psychologists remind us that grief isn't a straight line. It doesn't move neatly from one stage to the next. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and we all know the stages of grief. Most people don't know she was actually studying terminally ill people, anticipating their own death. And in her later writings, she talked about how she was disappointed that it is viewed that way. Now we have a dual process model of grief. We have a learning model of grief. We have internal working models of people and attachments in the world. And when someone dies, especially suddenly, our brain has to relearn how to access or connect with that person. If you want to go deep into that, I would also send you to the videos that I'm putting up in the grief course. That's why you can laugh one minute and cry the next, and that's normal. So for kids, this helps them understand that grief isn't about getting over it. It's about learning to live with loss while also finding ways to live fully. Kids and teens grieve differently. Children may act out their feelings through behavior, tantrums, clinginess, changes in sleep. Teens often understand death permanence because they have abstract thinking, but they tend to be more likely to hide their feelings. So both need honesty and presence. Don't be afraid to say the truth clearly. Charlie Kirk was killed. Don't over-explain either, but don't avoid. Your calm presence is what steadies them. So what can you do? Listen more than you speak. Validate their feelings. That makes sense that you'd feel that way. Normalize mixed emotions, sadness and laughter, or someone that says, I feel very sad for him and I feel happy that he gets to be with Jesus. But is it wrong to feel happy about that? To help normalize all of those feelings. Offer simple rituals and, most of all, model healthy grief. It's okay to cry. It's okay to hope. It's okay to keep living. So our kids need honesty, openness, and presence for us, but they also need a certain sense of security. Our kids are locking in their nervous systems to ours to co-regulate. So it's okay to cry, but we don't want them to see us completely losing it. It's okay to share our anger, but it can be very disorienting from kids if they hear things like, oh, this is so, we're going to get this person, this and this needs to happen. In moments like this, social media is everywhere, and kids can't unsee what they have seen online. Some of it can be helpful and others less helpful. YouTube has done a pretty good job of keeping the actual video off. Unfortunately, I went onto Instagram yesterday and I logged into my secret artist Instagram where I only follow artists because I wanted to see some people painting. It helps. It's true. That's just me. And as I'm scrolling without knowing, the video came up. So this can be a good time to use certain filters. We do allow some social media with some of our kids for short periods of time, but something like Bark, which we use, it filters at the level of the modem. So if any other devices come in, everything is covered. There are lots of things that work. I'll put a link for Bark, but if you just want something simple, that works. But again, I'm sure there's many others. The point is this can be a good time to pause that social media. I have paused it for at least a week, where some of those immediate things you won't run into. You would have to go search for them, which I don't believe they will, but you're less likely to just come across it. It's also important to protect your own heart. We can get pulled into news media as well. So get outside, be with the people that you love, and also protect those around you. Make sure you're not sending a video that someone's not expecting that could truly traumatize them. If someone's not expecting to see that video, like I wasn't expecting the scrolling, that can be very disorienting to someone, not knowing where they are. So protect your heart and those around you. Protecting our kids' heart and their eyes is also part of shepherding through grief. So there is this balance. Our brains are meaning makers. There's going to be a certain amount of, we want to know the rest of the story. Who was it? Some of those things can be helpful, but making sure we're balancing that. Remember that grief needs an outlet, and rituals help us turn pain into meaning. So attending Mass, lighting candles, sharing stories. These give us ways to remember and heal, and they say that love continues even if life changes. So encourage your kids to create their own rituals. Most grief softens in time, but if you notice helplessness or deep withdrawal or unsafe behavior, it's time to seek extra support, therapy, pastoral care, trusted mentor. Of course, this is not therapy. Getting help is not a lack of faith. And remember that grief can uncover unresolved grief from before. So it's not uncommon when there is a very public death or a public tragedy that therapists will get a lot of phone calls that, yes, are about that moment, but are also about the other unresolved things that now the psyche feels safe enough to process. Remember that grief lives in the body. That's why it helps to move, to pray aloud, to cry, to walk, to serve. Don't just sit back. Do something. Get involved. Serve your community. That's how you change lives and how you change your own. Anchor your grief in prayer. So go to Mass. I know that Charlie was not Catholic, but he encouraged people to connect with their own places of worship. Remember that Christ holds every tear. Another way to process grief is to channel it forward, to serve your neighbors, to donate, to volunteer, to offer kindness. Again, I'll refer to something Charlie said. The happiest people I know aren't the ones who get the most. They're the ones who give the most. Service brings healing. Loss can also be a teacher, and it can spark us to study, to reflect, to grow in wisdom and virtue. So encourage your kids to read, to ask questions, to deepen their roots in faith and other knowledge. Grief, if we let it, can be a growth. Charlie was a big reader. I'll refer again to his own words. Read good books, study history, learn the truth for yourselves. If you don't, someone else will teach you what to think. Grief comes in daily acts. It heals through daily acts as well. Praying, connecting, forgiving, showing courage. Another quote here. Young people, courage is doing the right thing even when it costs you something, and it will. These are my own thoughts. I will caveat it with this, but after working with many, many people over the years in trauma situations and grief I think that when people die, they leave us gifts, and it's up to us to find them. Sometimes it's the lessons that they taught. Sometimes it's the values that they stood for. Sometimes it's the way they make us think differently. Our job is to find those gifts, to treasure them, and to let them change us and how we live. That's part of moving forward and using that grieving energy in a productive way. So I came up with some ideas rooted in some of the things that Charlie talks about. You could, of course, donate to his organizations or organizations that are things that he sponsored or encouraged. Read 100 books a year, attend worship weekly, mentor a young person, start or join a local study group, volunteer in civic life, strengthen family traditions, commit to daily prayer, use social media for truth and light, support a cause beyond yourself, and practice daily courage. Charlie also wrote a book. It's coming out, I believe, December 8th, Stop in the Name of God, Why Honoring the Sabbath Will Transform Your Life. I knew it was coming. I couldn't wait to read it, and I made my pre-order today, so that's another option. We grieve Charlie's death together, but not as people without hope. God's love is stronger than death. And as Romans says, nothing can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. That is the truth that we pass on to our kids. Grief is real, but so is resurrection, and light wins always. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, point here is not to make a political position, but I know that Charlie was very influential in a lot of our homes for a lot of our kids. And as parents, we may need help on how to show up and address what's happening in our homes and in our children's lives and hearts. I'll leave with this. A final quote. I want to be remembered for courage for my faith. The most important thing is faith in my life. Charlie Kirk, may God bless and keep you. May the angels meet you and lead you to paradise.
Stretch across the night. Whispers linger, hearts grow tired. Every loss feels like the end. Every silence a broken hymn. But even here a spark remains, a fragile flame that bears tears have carved their sacred streams through the valley of broken dreams. Still a voice within me sings, hope is born on wounded wings. The darkness tries to steal the song, but grace has lived here all along. The light still shines in the dark, a quiet fire, a steady spark. Though the night is long, it cannot hold door.